Welcome to Movies Recap channel. Today I want to show you 1993 American epic historical drama film directed and produced by Steven Spielberg and written by Steven Zaillian. It is based on the 1982 novel by Australian novelist Thomas Keneally. After watching this film, I was deeply moved and shocked and remained impressed for a long time. I strongly recommend watching this film in its entirety to every person, because it touches on the most important issue, humanity. The relocation of Polish Jews from surrounding areas to Krakow begins in late 1939, shortly after the outbreak of World War II, when the German army defeats the Polish army in 3 weeks. Film opens with a close-up of unidentified hands lighting a pair of Shabbat candles, followed by the sound of a Hebrew prayer blessing the candles. This scene, one of only a handful of color scenes in the film, closes as the flames flicker out. The wisp of smoke from the dying flames fades into the next scene, now in black and white, and becomes a plume of smoke from a steam engine. A folding table is set up on a train platform, where a single Jewish family registers as Jews. The single table becomes many tables, and the single family becomes a large crowd. Close-up images of names being typed into lists provide a sense of the vast number of Jews arriving in Krakow. Oskar Schindler, Liam Neeson, appears in his Krakow hotel room. His face is not shown, and the focus is on his possessions. He puts on his expensive watch, cuff links, and Nazi party pin, and takes a large wad of bills from his night table. Schindler then enters a nightclub. Once he is seated, a high-ranking Nazi official at a nearby table catches his attention. Attempting to ingratiate himself with the local Nazis in order to secure lucrative war contracts, Schindler sends drinks to the table. Before long, he is treating a large table of Nazis and their friends to expensive food and fine wine. Schindler has his picture taken with everyone important at the table, as well as with dancers at the club. Schindler next visits the Judenrat, the Jewish council charged with carrying out Nazi orders in Krakow. He walks directly to the front of a seemingly endless line of Jews, where he finds his accountant, Itzhak Stern, Ben Kingsley. Schindler tells Stern that he needs investors, Jews, to help him buy an enamelware factory. Since Jews, by law, cannot own businesses, Schindler tells Stern that he will pay the investors in product, not money. A profiteer, Schindler knows that he will maximize his profit if he does not have to pay the Jewish investors in cash. He also wants Stern to run the business, but Stern initially refuses the offer, telling Schindler that the Jews will not be interested in investing. Schindler, however, does not give up. Next, he visits a church where Jewish smugglers conduct business. All of the smugglers, except one named Poldek Pfefferberg, are scared off. Schindler tells Pfefferberg he will need lots of luxury items in the coming months, and Pfefferberg promises to procure them. The scene then changes to one of masses of Jews walking over a bridge. Their armbands stand out starkly. It is March 20, 1941, the deadline for Jews to enter the ghetto. A little Polish girl in the street shouts, "Goodbye, Jews," over and over again. While Schindler arrives at his new luxury apartment, recently vacated by the Nussbaum family, the Nussbaums themselves arrive in the ghetto with thousands of other uprooted families. Schindler finally secures money from the Jewish investors, who agree to accept goods as payment, because, as Schindler points out, money will be worthless in the ghetto. Schindler sets up his factory with Stern's help and hires Jews, rather than Poles, because they are cheaper to employ. Opening the factory, Schindler pleases the Nazis and enjoys his newfound wealth and status as Herr Director, while Stern handles all administration. Workers at the factory will be deemed Essential A status that saves them from removal to death camps. Stern recognizes this fact immediately and fills the factory with many Jewish workers whom the Nazis would otherwise have deemed expendable. At this point, Schindler is unaware that Stern is using his position in the factory to save people. His awareness grows, however, when Stern brings to see him a one-armed man who wants to thank Schindler for saving him by making him essential. Schindler dismisses the gratitude and chastises Stern for bringing the man to see him. Shortly after the scolding, Schindler has to rescue Stern himself from a train bound for a death camp. Meanwhile, construction on the Plazo labor camp begins, and Amon Goeth, Rafe Fiennes, appears. Goeth, a sadistic Nazi, is charged with building and running the camp. The SS soon liquidates the Krakow ghetto, sending in hundreds of troops to empty the cramped rooms and shoot anyone who protests, is uncooperative, elderly, or infirmed, or for no reason at all. When Plac Zoo is completed, the Jews are evacuated from the Krakow ghetto and sent to the camp. From a hill high above the ghetto, Schindler and his girlfriend watch the destruction. He sees a little girl in a red coat, the only color in the otherwise black and white scene, walking through the carnage. Schindler's girlfriend tearfully begs him to go home, and Schindler is obviously moved by what he sees. Schindler convinces Goethe to allow him to build his own subcamp to house his factory workers. Schindler begins to participate actively in saving Jews when Regina Perlman, a Jewish girl passing as a Gentile, visits his office. She begs Schindler to hire her parents because she has heard that his factory is a haven. He refuses to help and sends her away. Later, he yells at Stern and tells him he is not in the business of saving people. But when Schindler finishes his tirade, he gives Stern his gold watch and tells him to bring the Perlmans over. With this decision, he begins to actively save Jews. Over time, Schindler gives Stern more and more of his own personal items to use for bribes to bring people to his factory. Some time later, Goethe is charged with evacuating Plac Zoo and exhuming and burning the bodies of 10,000 Jews killed there and at the Krakow ghetto. Schindler realizes that his workers, Stern included, face certain death at the hands of the Nazis, so he decides to spend his fortune to save as many Jews as he can. With that, Schindler begins to make his list. He persuades Goethe to sell him his workers to work in his factory in Czechoslovakia. Schindler also plays a game of high card draw for one worker in particular, Helen Hirsch, who'd been serving as Goethe's housekeeper and had been a victim of his continual abuse. Goethe is reluctant, hoping to run away with her but knowing that such an action would result in his death as well as hers. He also floats the idea of simply executing her but finally decides to play Schindler for Helen's life. Helen is among those who board the train to Brünlitz. The men and women are transported to Czechoslovakia on two separate trains, however, and the women are inadvertently diverted to Auschwitz. There, the women are directed to what they believe is a gas chamber. After a harrowing experience where their hair is crudely cut off and they are forced to strip, they see only water falling from the showers. The day after, the women are shown waiting in line for work. In the meantime, Schindler had rushed immediately to Auschwitz to solve the problem and to get the women out of Auschwitz. To this end he bribes the camp commander, Rudolf Haas, Hans Michael Rehberg, with a cache of diamonds so that he is able to spare all the women and the children. However, a last problem arises just when all the women are boarding the train because several SS officers attempt to hold some children back and prevent them from leaving. Schindler, there to personally oversee the boarding, steps in and is successful in obtaining from the officers the release of the children. Once the Schindler women arrive in Zwickau-Brünlitz, Schindler institutes firm controls on the Nazi guards assigned to the factory. Summary executions are forbidden, abuse of the workers is as well, and the Nazi guards are not allowed on the factory floor. Schindler also permits the Jews to observe the Sabbath, and spends much of his fortune acquired in Poland bribing Nazi officials. In his hometown, he surprises his wife while she's in church during Mass, and tells her that she is the only woman in his life, despite having been shown previously to be a womanizer. She goes with him to the factory to assist him. He runs out of money just as the German army surrenders, ending the war in Europe. As a German Nazi and self-described profiteer of slave labor, Schindler must flee the oncoming Soviet Red Army. After dismissing the Nazi guards to return to their families, he packs a car in the night, and bids farewell to his workers. They give him a letter explaining he is not a criminal to them, together with a ring engraved with the Talmudic quotation, "He who saves the life of one man, saves the world entire." Schindler is touched but deeply distraught, feeling he could have done more to save many more lives. He leaves with his wife during the night, dressed in Polish prisoner clothes, posing as refugees. The Schindler Jews, having slept outside the factory gates through the night, are awakened by sunlight the next morning. A Soviet dragoon arrives and announces to the Jews that they have been liberated by the Red Army. The Jews walk to a nearby town in search of food. A title card informs us that Schindler was declared a righteous person by the Yad Vashem of Jerusalem, and himself planted a tree on the Avenue of the Righteous in Israel, which still grows to this day. The fate of Goethe is also shown. He was captured near the German town of Bad Tolz and taken back to Passau where, defiant to the end and announcing his allegiance to Hitler, is hanged for crimes against humanity. As the surviving Schindler Jews walk abreast, the frame changes to another of the Schindler Jews in the present day, in color, at the grave of Oskar Schindler in Israel. The film ends with a procession of now aged Jews who worked in Schindler's factory, each of whom reverently sets a stone on his grave. The actors portraying the major characters walk hand in hand with the people they portrayed, also placing stones on Schindler's grave as they pass. Actor Ben Kingsley escorts the late Itzhak Stern's wife, and Caroline Goodall escorts Schindler's wife in her wheelchair. The audience learns that the survivors and descendants of the approximately 1,100 Jews sheltered by Schindler now number over 6,000. The Jewish population of Poland, once numbering in the millions, was at the time of the film's release approximately 4,000. In the final scene, a man, Nisan himself, though his face is not visible, places a pair of roses on the grave, and stands contemplatively over it.